Okay, guys, so this one is looking at the primary source packet, the outlook of life and death in Mesopotamia, and the gods as well. And so you have here, right, the introduction. This is, oops, I gotta select draw. This is the introduction that I wrote, just kind of giving you some background. And oops, I always forget. If I want to move down, I undo draw. And then here you have the questions that this is what you are supposed to be answering for your submission. So thinking about these questions when we're looking at the sources. So in what way are the gods portrayed, and how did that shape Mesopotamian outlook on life? How is the afterlife described in the Descent of Ishtar and Epic of Gilgamesh? And based on the sources, what is the overall view of life, death, and the gods? And how does it reflect the condition of climate and geography? So for this, think about, what is the geography of Mesopotamia? Well, we know that it was harsh and it was unpredictable. It could be violent. And it was, you had a variety of temperaments. So, you can almost say fickle, because you have the desert, you also have the Fertile Crescent, you have the rivers, but they are not calm. And then you also have, think of geography. This is climate, which is due somewhat to geography. And then in geography, you also have then the components of no borders, no clear borders, right? There was nothing stopping other soldiers and enemy armies from crossing into areas. We'll see Egypt had these kind of physical barriers due to their geography of where they were. And it made it harder for invading armies to actually go in and do anything. Mesopotamia did not have that. So if you have more, right, and so what is this going to lead to? This is going to lead to more conflict. Ultimately, this is why kingship develops. But what it does is it leads to more conflict and, you could say, violence. And if you have more conflict and violence that is occurring, and then you also have this reinforced by the climate, think about then how their gods are structured. The other thing I want to mention is that, let's do it, where we got space, I guess I'll do it right here. There's 3 phases, and I talked about these in the Zoom meetings, but the 3 phases of how the gods were viewed. Okay, so the first was natural forces, gods as natural forces. That's, wind, water, fertility. The gods, it became, a reason to explain why there was fertility, why there was a flood, why there was a windstorm, right? Why there was a drought. They were natural forces, and so the god was pissed. That's why this bad natural thing happened. This doesn't ever go away. So when the next phase happens, they still are natural forces. They just aren't guided by them in the same way. In the early literature, the gods have very little personality. Their purpose is really to explain natural forces. When we look at the Descent of Ishtar, Ereshkigal has a lot more personality than Ishtar. Ishtar does not have almost any personality. Ereshkigal has a ton. So it's interesting that way, right? She's the goddess of the afterlife or the underworld. And so she gets a little bit more personality, but the natural force, which is fertility for Ishtar, she's there to explain why fertility could cease to exist in the seasons because of what she did, but she doesn't have a lot of agency. She gets more in later ones when they become rulers, gods as rulers. When it shifts to kingship, the literature begins to have the gods as patron deities. So in the Epic of Gilgamesh, Ishtar is the patron deity of Uruk. And when Gilgamesh spurns her, so Ishtar sees Gilgamesh in the Epic of Gilgamesh, and she's like, ooh, you're handsome, you want to get together. And Gilgamesh is like, there is no way in hell I would ever want to be with you. And then he goes through and doesn't stop there. He proceeds to list all of her failed relationships and why they turned out bad for the guy. And is like, yeah, so as you can clearly see, you suck. And she, of course, not surprisingly, considering the gods weren't very patient or nice, gets super pissed at him, and she sends the Bull of Heaven to destroy Uruk, which she was supposed to be the patron deity of. This requires Gilgamesh and Enkidu to fight the Bull of Heaven to save Uruk. They succeed, but Enkidu ends up getting an injury that is fatal from that fight, and then he's going to die, and then that sends Gilgamesh on his quest. Their rulers, their patron deities, they're supposed to care about the city, but they still don't care about individuals. And that's one thing we're going to see. The gods are harsh. They're uncaring. It's more like don't piss off the gods than anything else. And then the last one is parents. But again, I caution you on this, that parents is relative. This is with Hammurabi and Babylon. So one of the things that's to think about, right, is that Hammurabi and Babylon were some of the safest and securest city in Mesopotamia at the time. You had, so the first, you think about like the natural forces was as the kind of most insecure or unsecure both places in or periods in time. Then when kings started taking over, they provided some stability and some ending of warfare, but not completely. And so the gods get a little bit nicer. Not a lot, but a little bit. And then Hammurabi, you have the most secure and calm period in time, and the gods get a little bit more personal. They're still natural forces. They still, you don't want to piss them off because they'll punish you. But you can actually, in the third phase, you can actually pray directly to the gods. In the first two phases, you did not pray directly to the gods in the literature. That's what the head priest was for, because you did not want the gods. You were better off having the gods not know who you were than praying to them. But in the third one, there was kind of an expectation that they might care enough to help you. Might is a big thing, right? They might not, but they might. And so you do have like the penitential prayer to every god, where the guy is praying directly to the gods. So that's important to know when we're looking at this. So let's talk about these. Let's start with, actually, let's go in order. So Descent of Ishtar. In the Descent of Ishtar, Ishtar decides to go to the underworld. Ereshkigal is Ishtar's sister. Okay, and she is goddess of the underworld, right? And then Ishtar is the goddess of fertility. Arkala, the abode of Arkala, goes to same thing. Okay, so to the land of no return, which makes sense. You die, you go to the afterlife, you're not returning from there. The realm of Ereshkigal, Ishtar, the daughter of the moon, set her mind to the dark house, the abode of Arkala, to the house which none leave. Okay, so she's basically, this first couple sentences are just saying Ishtar decided to go to the underworld. That's all it's saying, right? And then it describes, this whole part here is the description of the afterlife. And I'm going to use afterlife and underworld simultaneously, and they're meant to be synonymous, so just know I'm going to switch back and forth. And I'll say afterlife and then right after say underworld. So either way, afterlife, underworld, same thing. So this is the description. So let's look at the description. The dark house, the house which none leave who have entered, to the road from which there is no way back. I mean, they make it clear you ain't coming back from this, except for we'll see Ishtar does, but exceptions. To the house wherein the entrance are bereft of light, so there's no light, where the dust is their fare and clay their food. So, yay for clay and dust for food. They see no light, residing in darkness. It says they are clothed like birds with wings for garments, where over the door and bolt is spread with dust. Right, this doesn't sound like a pleasant place, and we'll see even more kind of disturbing description with Epic of Gilgamesh. It's not a nice place. The afterlife in Mesopotamia was not positive. You know, the idea was kind of like life was harsh, and life was harsh in the afterlife. And that's what kind of kicks off Gilgamesh's quest for the immortality, is this suggestion of like, well, if life sucks, current life, and life sucks in the afterlife. What's the point of life? And he, first it's, well, I'm just going to seek immortality because I don't want to die and go to the afterlife. And then it explores beyond that. And she said to the gatekeeper, "O gatekeeper, open thy gate." And so then, and she threatens here. Look, if thou openest not the gate, if you don't open the gate so that I cannot enter, I will smash the door, I will shatter the bolt, I will smash the doorpost, I will move the doors, I will raise up the dead, eating the living, so that the dead outnumber the living. I always think of this as zombies. But what she's saying is that this is not caring about people, because she's basically saying, if you don't let me in, then I will smash open the door so the dead can come up and they'll eat and destroy the living. Do I care? Nope. So again, there's a description of the gods, not super caring about any individual. And this is definitely Ishtar as a natural force. And so then Ishtar tells the gatekeeper, okay, let her in. Well, the gatekeeper first says, "Stop, I'll go announce you to Queen Ereshkigal." And then Ereshkigal gets upset, and also wondering why, a little bit concerned about why she's coming to the afterlife, and then also, what should she care? Look, here's another one with the gods and their view, right? Should I eat clay for bread, drink muddied water for beer? Should I bemoan... Actually, here we go. That's her part. Should I bemoan the men who left their wives behind? Should I bemoan the maidens who were wretched from the laps of their lovers? Or should I bemoan the tender little one who was sent off before his time? And this is somewhat of addressing, though, these were all people who have died. And so you have that kind of reflection, but it's also asking, should I be concerned or care about this? Then she says, "Go, let her in." And so they do, and we're not going to read all the whole part of where they let her in. This whole part here is she goes through each gate, okay? And at each gate, what she does, she's stripped of clothing or jewelry to get to the afterlife. And this process is representing her basically not only entering the afterlife, but dying, right? This then represents the death of fertility. And, Ishtar, but we'll see, Ishtar's not really dead, because, again, they're gods. But it's definitely, each one of these is stripping away her power. This idea of that removing the clothing, removing that is takes away her power, and you could say her life, because then she's trapped in the afterlife when she gets to Ereshkigal, right? And they don't get along. As soon as Ishtar had descended to the land of no return, Ereshkigal saw her and burst out of her presence. Ishtar, unreflecting, flew at her. Ereshkigal opened her mouth. "Go, Namtar, lock her up in my palace." And then it's all these miseries, right? So again, even the gods against each other. Misery of the eyes, miseries of the side, heart, feet, and every part of her against her whole body. Until after Lady Ishtar. So again, this idea of character of the gods. They obviously don't like each other. It's not surprising. Think about it. Like, Ereshkigal's got the crap job. She may have some power, but she's queen of the afterlife or underworld, and it's a crappy place. There is nothing great about it. And then her sister Ishtar is goddess of fertility. She's got the cush job. So it's not surprising that the Ereshkigal doesn't particularly care for her. But then it talks about once she's in the afterlife, right? After Lady Ishtar had descended to the netherworld, the bull springs not upon the cow, the ass impregnates not the jinni, in the street the man impregnates not the maiden, the man lies in his own chamber, the maiden lies on her side. So this is, right, fertility ends. And it ends because, for all purpose, Ishtar is dead. Because she's a god, she's still in the afterlife, but in the present world, or the, the current world, the world where they're living still are and continue to be, she's no longer there. She has died in that sense, and that's that process of going through each gate. And we'll see it that in order to restore her life, she has to go through each gate and get everything back. And it's like restoring her life and power. So because Ishtar is dead, because she's a natural force, fertility ceased to exist in the land. And so the gods kind of freak out about this and say, right, and they repeat it. They basically repeat that same thing. Because Ishtar's there, there's no fertility. What are we going to do? And so what they decide to do is they create a Shushamanar, and his name translated means good looking or good looks. Okay, so that's his name. So they created this eunuch, or whether it was a full person or just a kind of shell. They created this good looking specifically to go to Ereshkigal. And it says, Ereshkigal shall see thee and rejoice at thy presence. When her heart has calmed, her mood is happy. Let her utter the oath of the great gods. This is connected to hospitality. And the idea that if she offers, like, what is something I can give you? If a stranger came into your home, Mesopotamia did have this kind of hospitality that if you said, what is it I can do for you, then you were supposed to provide. And so they said why do the gods care? Well, because humans make sacrifices of animals and grain and wine, and the gods were fed by those sacrifices. So if all the fertility ceased to exist, the world eventually dies out, and then the gods do as well. So they can't have that, so they want to bring Ishtar back. So they create good looking to trick Ereshkigal. Essentially, she'll be like, ooh, I've been in the afterlife so long, look at you, you're good looking. And then she'll say, what is it that, welcome to my home, what can I get you, what I can do for you. That's the oath of the great gods. And when she does that, lift up thy head, paying mind to the life water bag. This is the only way out of the afterlife. Okay, so if they, you want to get out of the afterlife, you have to have the life water bag, and you have to drink it. Although there's a balance to the afterlife, so someone still has to take your place, but it's the only way you can get out. So what's interesting with how the way that they did this narration is that they're telling good looking what to do, and then it just assumes that's what he did. So it doesn't tell us that he did it. It's assuming that when they tell him what he's supposed to do, at the same time then he went and did that. And you'll see what I mean in just a minute. Pray, lady, let them give me the life water bag, and the water therefrom I may drink. So this part is this is the gods telling him what to do, and this is good looking doing it. Okay, and then as soon as Ereshkigal heard this, she smote her thigh and bit her finger. So it's like slapping your thigh and biting your finger. This is like, she's pissed, rage. She's so mad at that. It doesn't sound like it much from us. I think modern stuff. But she's pissed. Why? Because she knows she just got screwed over, that she got tricked. Thou did request of me a thing that should not be requested. Come, good looking, I will curse thee with a mighty curse. And then the food of the city's gutters shall be thy food. The sewers of the city shall be thy drink. The threshold shall be thy habitation. The besotted and the thirsty shall smite supposed to be thy cheek. Okay, so I would argue, this is never talked about in this, that good looking got the raw end of this deal. He was created to be a sacrificial lamb. And he ends up taking all of Ereshkigal's rage because she knows what it means. As soon as he asked for the life water, so right, the gods sent him down, he did what they instructed, she got all smitten with him, asked what could she do for him. He said, oh, the life water bag looks tasty, and then she gets pissed because she knows that it's not for him. She realized that the gods tricked her, and so she puts all of her anger on a good looking who gets all these, curse things. But she has to then, based on the oath of the gods, she has to give Ereshkigal the life water, which allows her to go back up. And so then she says to Namtar, sprinkle Ishtar with the water of life and take her from my presence. And then what you'll notice, and again, this is repetitive because this was originally an oral tale. So they would, they would have speakers, that storytellers that would tell the story. And then by repeating these steps, one, it helped the storyteller remember it. Two, it helped people who were listening remember it as well. Because if there are important parts you wanted them to know, if you have that kind of rhythm and repetition, it sticks in your brain. So here, she's going, it's the opposite of before, going back through gates and getting clothing and jewelry. Right? And getting the clothing and jewelry restores her, it's a representation of life and power. The life water was what restored it. However, there's a thing with it, right? She says, if this is Ereshkigal, was put E saying this, okay? Telling Namtar, her gatekeeper, if she does not give thee her ransom price, bring her back. As for Tammuz, the lover of her youth, okay, so we're going to stop right there. This is Ishtar's husband. Okay, and the ransom price was that balance. Just because she got the life water bag, that let her go back up out of the afterlife. But you one in, one out. It had to stay even. So if someone left the afterlife, someone had to go in. So she was required to give a ransom price. Ereshkigal said if she doesn't, then you bring her back. But Ereshkigal's got more in store, which is to set her up. She says, now for Tammuz, her husband, wash him with pure water, anoint him with sweet oil, clothe him with a red garment, and let him play on a flute of lapis. Let the courtesans turn his mood. So this is basically saying make him look nice, her husband, have him playing music, and have women near him. So that when Ishtar comes back up, Ishtar sees this. And then she gets mad because her husband or lover of her youth isn't mourning her. He's all now nicely clothed, even though it's suggesting he wasn't, because Ereshkigal tells Namtar to go clothe him nicely and get the courtesans, like basically set up this scene. Get him all changed, dressed up, washed up. Make him look nice. Put some women around him. Give him a flute to play. So when Ishtar actually makes it through the gate, she's going to see him and think, oh, I obviously mean nothing to you because you haven't been mourning my death at all. You're sitting here dressed all fancy, playing the flute music and having these women all hanging off of you, which is what happens. Is that Ishtar sends Tammuz to her as her ransom price. Now, Belili was Tammuz's sister. You also see his name as Dumuzi sometimes, so it's just a translation. Belili is Tammuz's sister. And she ends up being distraught, right? You shall not rob me of my brother forever. So on the day that Tammuz comes up to me, with him the lapis flute and carnelian ring come up with me, when with him the wailing men and wailing women come up to me, may the dead rise and smell the incense. It's hard to understand what that is saying, but it's connected to she agreed to share his place. So Tammuz spent half of the time in the afterlife. Then he would come up, they would get to greet each other for a day and say hi, and then she would take his place, so that they both got life. He got life for half a year. What this does is they actually both, and it doesn't show it in here, so you wouldn't know this part, but they actually both represent different flowers, and so it explains seasons, right? The idea that when Tammuz goes down, the season changes, and then when Belil goes down, the season changes. So this gives us an explanation for the seasons. It also shows the gods, and the importance of fertility, and also that the gods are kind of crappy. Okay, so that's that one. Then let's look at Epic of Gilgamesh. So these are just excerpts because it's a much longer story. Basically, Gilgamesh was a crappy king. He was part god. He actually is part god, and he constantly took the men from his town of Uruk to war in this myth, and also took advantage of an ancient rite that wasn't supposed to be practiced anymore, which was that on the night before a bride's wedding, the king could go have sex with her. And so, understandably, everyone was pissed. They prayed to the gods and were like, hey, he's kind of part you, he's your problem, help us. So they send Enkidu, who, when he arrives in the earth, he's wild, he's living with the animals, it says. And they actually send a temple priestess to have sex with him to civilize him. And so they do, and then he goes and he fights Gilgamesh and stops him from going to the bride's room the night before. And they fight, and then Gilgamesh gets happy because he finally found someone who was his strength and equal. And they become best of friends. And they go on tons of adventures until, the one story I told you, they come across Ishtar. And Gilgamesh insults the crap out of Ishtar. And she sends the bowl of heaven. This is the very short Cliff Notes version. And she sends the bowl of heaven to Uruk. They fight it. And the irony of it all is Enkidu had already tried to stop Gilgamesh and say, have we not done enough adventures before they ran into Ishtar? And so if he would only have listened to Enkidu, this wouldn't have happened. But Enkidu gets mortally wounded. They say their goodbyes. He dies. Gilgamesh refuses to accept it. He leaves Enkidu's body on display until maggots are coming out of him. And then it's like he's horrified by the death and he's afraid of death. But even more so, before Enkidu died, he tells him about his dream of the afterlife. This scares Gilgamesh, and he decides that he needs to go on a quest to find immortality so he doesn't have to face that. And then it's the journey of doing that. And he's told along the way that it's impossible. It's not a thing that is the right order of things. And then he comes across basically the Mesopotamian Noah, who is also Atrahasis in another story. He's the one that made an ark and saved people. Because of being faithful to one of the gods and saving people, they grant him and his wife immortality. And so then he says, look, you can't be immortal like us because the gods gave it to us. But then he tells Gilgamesh that there is one way, there's this plant that at least will rejuvenate you back to your youth. And so Gilgamesh swims down to the bottom of the lake and gets it. But then there's different versions. One is he falls asleep afterwards. The other is that he's going and grabbing something. Either way, a snake eats the plant, and when Gilgamesh wakes up and or comes back from wherever his errand that he was, he finds the plant gone, and only was left was the shedding skin of a snake, representing the snake starting a new life as a young snake again, which should also have somewhat allusions to that biblical Mesopotamian Noah and the Garden of Eden and the snake. Which shouldn't be surprising because when we talk about the Hebrews, they originated from Mesopotamia. So there should be similarities there. And then Gilgamesh laments his loss, and then he gets a ferryman boatman to bring him back to Uruk. And along the way, he realizes that his immortality is in the city of Uruk, the walls, the people, how he lives his life. And that kind of becomes, what's the point of life? If life sucks and the afterlife sucks, what's the point? And the point is that you live your best life you can, you appreciate, enjoy life while you can, but you also leave the legacy of your family, of your actions, of your deeds. And for Gilgamesh as a king, being a good king is part of that. And so then it implies that he became a good king, you know, in the end with Enkidu, and after he remained a good king, even though he started out as a bad king. And for sure, in Mesopotamian literature, throughout, Gilgamesh becomes used as an example of a good king. So he may have started out crappy, but he became better. So this is the other one of the afterlife, right? And this one is interesting. Well, if we're looking at where it starts, it mentions the great groans and stood facing devastation. A fierce, threatening creature flew down at me and pushed me with its talons toward the horror-filled house of death where Kala, Queen of Shades, stands in command. There is darkness which lets no person again see light of day. There is a road leading away from bright and lively life. There dwell those who eat dry dust and no cooling water to quench their awful thirst. And it goes on, but like this is again the afterlife. It's not a nice description at all, and it's not surprising that it kind of terrifies Gilgamesh. But it gives you, these both give you like that view of how the Mesopotamians saw it. Here is the Sir Duri's advice. That you will not find that life that you pursue. When God's created mankind, they allotted to him death. But life they retained in their own keeping. She's saying, right, that immortality is not possible. And then here you also have, instead, fill your belly with good things. Make thou merry by day and by night. Of each day make thou a feast of rejoicing. Day and night dance and play. Let your clothing be sparkling and fresh. Thy head be washed. Bathe thou in water. Love the child that holds onto thy hand. Make your wife happy in your embrace. This is the lot of mankind. So this, here, she's giving him, this is one of the gods, when Gilgamesh is on his quest. She says immortality is not possible. Here is the purpose of life. This is why. This is what we make of it, right? That, life, sure, it might be hard, it might be harsh, it might be difficult, and the afterlife might not be pretty, but here's what the purpose is. He ignores that. He eventually comes back to this, but he ignores that. And then this other one is talking about the plant, and then I'm not going to go through this one as much, but the epilogue is that recognition of the consequences of that. Okay, and then the last one, the penitential prayer to every god. This one is the gods as parents, because this person is praying directly to the gods, right? That happens, and that wouldn't. There's at least some expectation that they might help him. So what we don't know. We don't know. He's afflicted with something, but it doesn't say what. And he obviously thinks the gods caused it. The problem is that he doesn't know which god he offended. And so he's trying to fix it by praying to all gods, right? May the wrath of the heart of my God be pacified. May the God who is unknown to me be pacified. May the goddess who is unknown to me be pacified. May the known and unknown God be pacified. May the known and unknown goddess be pacified. This is like cover all bases. But think about it, like it's still wrath. And then there's the anger. And clearly this idea that they had to be pacified, right? Some god or goddess, what his belief, the person that wrote this, was offended. He did something to one of them, but he doesn't know who. So I just going to try to widen the possibilities that hopefully whoever I offended will hear my pleas and eventually will show mercy. Which just the fact that, look, unto my merciful God I turn, I make supplication. The idea that there is a belief that that the gods will show mercy is definitely part of that parent stuff too, right? Although it's going to leave us with not knowing the end solution, right? Because he says, the misdeed which I have committed I know not. An offense against my God I have unwittingly committed. A transgression against my goddess I have unwittingly done. So this idea that like you can piss off the gods are angry, but he has no idea why. Again, so this one's interesting. Even when it's parents, the gods are not friendly in Mesopotamia. But this is the best they've been, that you could actually pray directly to them, and you could hope that they would show you mercy, right? But if you look at these characteristics, right, it still doesn't give a glowing review of the character of the gods here. But let the Lord in the anger of his heart have looked upon me. The God in the wrath of his heart hath visited me. The goddess hath become angry with me and hath grievously stricken me. So here again is how we know that something's wrong with him. We just don't know what. The known and unknown goddess have straitened me. The known or unknown goddess have brought affliction upon me. I sought for help, but no one taketh my hand. So far, no God has helped. He's still afflicted and stricken, which is why he spreads it out to, well, hopefully some God out there. So, please have mercy, help me, help me. And then this is the lamentation. How long are you going to be pissed off at me? How long until you're pacified? I know I've sinned and I've been horrible. The sin which I have sinned, turn to mercy. Again, here's where we see, besides the direct pair, the gods as parents. You don't see this in literature in the earlier phases. The iniquity which I have committed, let the wind carry away. Forgive my sins, forgive my sins, forgive my sins. We don't actually know what happens, right? It just ends. So it's not super positive where thank you, we don't get a follow-up. Thank you for ending my affliction. Who knows? But it shows that dichotomy. The gods don't ever get super nice, but you do have at least the ability to believe that they might show mercy and that you can pray directly to them in the process. So hopefully this helps as you're looking at the sources to answer those questions. If you still have any questions after this, let me know. Send me an email or text, and we can go over that more. But hopefully that the goal is that after you've read it, after we've kind of discussed in the Zoom meetings, and then after this recording going over them, you should have a clear understanding of these sources. You should understand what they mean and what the stories or the lamentation was about. So if any of these are still unclear to you, please reach out, okay? Because I want to make sure that those make sense. All right.